Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rob Odell from Wheaton Wealth Partners in Wheaton, Illinois, and I welcome you to our webinar, The Do's and Don'ts of Luxury Cars, Buying, Selling, and Maintaining. And I guess it's just not luxury cars, but it can be exotic cars, or it can be everyday cars. I think this is going to be a very informative webinar in which you will learn many things about the automotive industry. Until I learned some of these things, I was truly ignorant here. A couple of items of business before we get started here today is, first of all, this webinar will last approximately 1 hour. We will do questions and answers, and for those of you who wish to ask questions, on the bottom right corner of your GoToMeeting screen, you will see chat. If you could write your question in chat, and we will receive it here, and either I will interrupt the presenter and ask the question, or I'll save it to the end. But we're going to try to get everybody's questions answered. We have a record number of attendees, so if there are a lot of questions and we aren't able to get to them, we will send out a blast with answers to those questions after the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and placed on our website for those of you who wish to send it on or make reference to your family or friends who might be interested in this topic. So those are my items of business. Let's begin. Many of you are probably wondering, why would a financial wealth advisory firm host a webinar on automotive do's and don'ts in purchasing, selling, and maintaining? What we have found as wealth advisors is that automobiles are often one of the more higher-end assets of a client might have, and there's a tremendous cost in not properly maintaining them, as well as transacting. There's a lot of money that can be made, is often made or lost in a transaction of an automobile. And how this came about, I'll just give a quick story on how we decided to start offering this program to our clients. About a year ago, I was in Florida at our Florida office in Naples, and I was having lunch with a client and an insurance professional. And as soon as the order came, the lunch, when the person took the lunch, the insurance professional went into the insurance dynamics, the pitch, if you will, to my client. My client looked at the insurance person and said, "Time out, I'm the client, I want to talk about cars today." And it took about 30 minutes we talked about cars, buying and selling higher-end luxury automobiles. I'm not a car person, as many of you know, and I started to get on my iPhone. I started thinking, these are a lot of good questions this person's asking, but I wondered if there was a business model out there in the automotive industry that was a fee-for-service car consultant. And there wasn't any that I knew of at that time. I think it would really be cool to have a model similar to Wheaton Wealth Partners, where people pay us fees and we give advice, and our interests are aligned with the interests of the client. I think it'd be really cool if that existed in the automotive industry in the same way. Well, 3 months later, a friend of mine asked me to have lunch with David Bentson, who I did not know at the time, but asked me to have lunch with him and review his business model. Dave came to my office, we had lunch, and he was a fee-only automotive consultant. That is different than a broker. A broker is someone who makes money on the transaction, very similar to the financial services industry, where you have brokers and salespeople who receive commissions for products. However, Dave is fee-for-service or fee-only automotive consultant. And so Dave and I became friends. I looked at his business model. I thought this was wonderful. I sent him to the client I had lunch with about a year ago. That specific client has done several car transactions with Dave, in which he paid Dave a fee. Dave gave him advice and was able to obtain the car that was desired for my client. So that being said, it's a privilege to be able to introduce to you Dave Bentson, founder and president of Precision Automotive Group. So Dave, thanks for being with us today.
Rob, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, let's begin. Dave, I think as opposed to reading a bio of Dave that I could send to you and you could read for yourself, I would rather begin this webinar just kind of going, this is your life, Dave Bentson, and how it revolved around automobiles. So tell us about your early memories with automobiles.
Well, I was born into an automotive family. The first picture you'll see here, well, not that one. The second picture you'll see here is me of a young guy with my favorite toys growing up. So my dad turned 60 earlier this month, and 62, and his entire career he's only worked for Genuine Parts Company, which is Napa. So born into an automotive family, it was a natural progression for me when I moved to my first job, which was at Lamborghini Chicago.
In fact, click on that for a second, Dave, if you don't mind, because this is what really caught me. The first time we had lunch, I remember you telling me about the day you turned 16. Tell us about that.
The day I turned 16, I got two things, my license and my first real job, what I would call my real job. I dropped my dad back off at home on our way from the DMV, and my first stop was Lamborghini Chicago. I walked in, asked to speak with the owner, and a couple minutes later I sit down with him, and we had a great chat in his office. And
So 16 years old, you walk in and ask to speak to the owner of this Lamborghini dealership.
Yes, and I sat down with Bill Nuccio, and he hired me on the spot. That was my first job.
That caught my attention right away. Let's talk about it. You were in high school at the time, and you went on to college. And when you went to college, you went to Miami of Ohio, right?
Went to Miami of Ohio, yep, Miami University.
Okay, studied business and
graduated with a business degree. I stress graduated because my first job afterwards was, in fact, managing a body shop. A good friend of mine back home owned a high-end body shop. He needed some help, and so I agreed to come on board. My parents were not thrilled, but I loved it there.
You loved it there, okay. And at the body shop, that kind of led to something else.
Yeah, it did. So while I was working at the body shop, Dana Meekum came across a brochure that we put together back in college, and he approached me while I was working at the body shop and said, would you manage, I've got an upcoming auction. I'd like you to oversee some of these cars I have. And so I said, sure. So I did that part-time. Dennis, the owner of the body shop, had no problem with me helping Dana. And so Dana said, I'm going to give you 20 cars, and we're going to rent out a space, and I want you to oversee these vehicles and prep them for auction. So I said, okay. 20 cars grew to 40, grew to 76 of Dana's cars we had in an airplane hangar. We had to move out the planes, and we prepped those cars for auction, and that work there turned into a full-time job. So
and kind of the takeaways from your first experience managing body shop and the auction. What are some of the things you learned about the automotive industry from both the body shop and the auction industry?
Well, yeah, 2 pictures ago, you see Brent painting a car, and Brent's painting, it was a Lamborghini Diablo in that picture. So I got to see, my first job, I got to see what cars look like being sold new as a Lamborghini. I got to see what happens when you wreck your Lamborghini, and many are wrecked. How do you put it back together again? What kind of parts do you use? What kind of paint are you using? So I got to see collision repair, restoration, service repair at the dealership. And so again, natural progression in my career was, I didn't know a ton about the auction business. And so when Dana offered me the job, I thought, sure, I'll go learn about classic cars.
And so then after Dana, when those days came to end, corporate America came knocking on your door.
Yeah, a good friend of mine worked for ITW, Illinois Tool Works, which is a Fortune 150 manufacturing conglomerate. And he was working in their product development center on capless refueling at the time. So many of you out there, if you own a Ford or a Cadillac or a number of other newer vehicles, you'll see you don't have a gas cap on your car. A good friend of mine was working on that technology, told his bosses about me and some of my background. ITW was looking to start an aftermarket automotive division, and so they offered me a job, and I came on board.
Awesome. And takeaways from there? I mean, from the supply side of the business, was it?
Yeah, it was. It was, it was interesting because ITW is corporate America. So I started in their product development center. So I got to see what corporate product development looked like. And then from there, I moved to another division of ITW, and we were a supplier to the automotive industry. And so, I spent some time working with the engineers in Detroit that are designing, well, we're 2015, so they're probably working on the 2022 version of the next Chevy Tahoe, but I got to work with them, supply them parts. I spent a lot of time in factories. I still love automotive assembly plants, one of my favorite places to be in the world.
So when your time came to the end at ITW, tell us about what led you to kind of go the path you're on today with your business.
Yeah, I had always thought about what the perfect dealership looked like. When I turned 16, didn't know anything better. I'm going to go work at the Lamborghini dealership. So from the time that I was 16 until 26 or so, I was always thinking about what does the perfect dealership look like? What's the dealership experience look like? How are they looking out for their clients? What kind of cars are they selling? What do you do with the cars that come in on trade that really you have no business retailing, So I always loved that business model, and I knew a number of dealer owners, and I went around and I talked to them. but I never found the perfect dealership to work at. I always thought that there was a conflict of interest, and I just saw a lot of good men, a lot of good, and I know women that own dealerships as well, but a lot of good folks that own dealerships. They have a great business model, but what do you do with that car that comes in on trade that leaks oil, that was in an accident, even though it shows up as a clear one-owner CARFAX? What do you do with those cars?
Well, in your transaction business, just like the financial world, there tends to be a conflict of interest in most business models. In terms of you're a broker, obviously you want to serve your client the best you can, but you make money on the deal. You know, if it's a financial transaction.
Sure.
Same thing in the automotive industry, and it's hard to find a pure model in which your interests are in this line with your client's interests. And I think that's kind of what I saw in you when I met you a year ago. And this was, yeah.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of regulations and regulatory bodies that are kind of overseeing how you do things in the financial industry. We don't have that many in the automotive industry, and so I saw that there was a bit of a gap between just dealerships weren't as transparent as I would have liked, and so it was a natural progression really for me to start Precision Automotive Group.
So your business is what? Just describe briefly at a high level what your business model is.
Sure. Well, what we do is we provide unbiased automotive expertise to our clients. That's what our landing page says, and that's what we do. Our best clients would say that we are their go-to car guy for all things automotive. So practically speaking, that would mean that we help you acquire a car for your collection, or we help you sell, the wife's car and get her into something else. But we also help you own the cars. We help you manage the cars that you own and oversee them so that you can enjoy your time with them rather than worrying about, the maintenance and
Sure.
Are you getting a good deal and is this a good car?
Well, Dave, when you first laid out your business model to me, myself being a Generation X and a skeptic, first thing I thought of myself is, with the internet and the online resources that are out there today, why would someone want to pay you a fee when I can go to the internet and go to an organization or a website like CARFAX to get my information? Before you answer that, I like CARFAX, and I just want to show this video of CARFAX. I think it's great.
I don't even know why I bother. Do you want to go home? You don't pay attention to what I say. You're not even listening now, are you? No, what are you doing? Tell me. Mother of pearl!
People do some strange things to cars. That's why there's CARFAX. We'll give you the real history of any used car. Get a CARFAX report from your dealer or at CARFAX.com.
All right, let's talk about CARFAX. What are some observations about CARFAX?
Well, I'm going to start here. I think we have everybody muted, but I'm going to say most folks in this audience have probably heard of CARFAX. I would say that most likely some of you may have even used CARFAX, and I'll tell you, I use CARFAX. But it's important to remember what CARFAX is. I use CARFAX as a tool to benefit my clients, and I also view it really as one of my obligations. My clients need to understand the reality of the limitations of those tools. And one of them is, what is the limitations of CARFAX? Which
can be dangerous to the end consumer. So let's give two examples. Now, the examples we're giving are high-end cars, exotic cars, if you will. I think the same can be true if it's a luxury or an everyday car in terms of the information that CARFAX obtains from insurance companies, from auto body shops, and other places. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, these are two of the more higher profile examples that I've come across, and I think that we'll let you guys decide. But I'm pretty sure that these will really paint the picture.
Now, here's a copy of a CARFAX report. This is a car that we identified by license plate number, correct? And it's clean, so you can't see it. It's clean, but you can see there it's a leased vehicle.
It's a one-owner, clean CARFAX vehicle. It has 6 service records, and it shows up on the CARFAX as a leased vehicle.
Yeah, right there. And those green check marks means good, right? Meaning no history.
Means everything that, all the data that CARFAX has collected on this vehicle checks out. Yes.
Okay, so this is a Lamborghini, right?
Yes, this is it's a 2013 Lamborghini
yellow car right there.
Spider. That's the car.
That is the car. Okay.
That is the specific car that I ran this CARFAX on. I ran it from that license plate, as you said, Rob. But this is a high-profile Lamborghini. One of the things that the CARFAX didn't tell you is who drove this car previously.
And for those of you who don't know who that is, it's a guy named Justin Bieber. Thank goodness I have boys and they don't listen to this guy. But Justin Bieber was driving around Miami and he got his DUI in this, if I understand that right.
Justin Bieber got arrested in Miami driving this vehicle. He got a DUI, and then I believe that they also charged him with drag racing in this vehicle. So yes, so I think it's important just to note that if we're buying a car solely based on CARFAX, you'd look at this and say, well, it's a clean one-owner vehicle with service records. But in reality, it wasn't a leased vehicle. It was leased by a rental agency that offered it as an incentive to pop stars and professional athletes when they came into town, so that they didn't have to rent a Chevy Cavalier like the rest of us, you know?
Right. And there's a big difference I've learned from you is the previous owner of a car can have a big difference. Whether you have Justin driving around in it or a retired engineer, that's day and night. It can be the same vehicle, but the previous owner.
Yeah, for the most part, all new vehicles are created equal. Not all pre-owned vehicles are then they're equal. And I, just as you mentioned, there's a big difference between a one-year-old Gallardo that was owned by a retired engineer who rubbed it with a diaper and one that Justin Bieber got a DUI on.
Right. Let's give a second example. Again, it's a high-end case, high-end car, but the same can be true for any type of car. And you'll give an example of this in a second right now. Here's another CARFAX report. It has 21,000 miles. There's been 8 service records. And this is was it a Lamborghini, this one?
Yes, this is a Lamborghini Murcielago. Again, comes up as a clean one-owner CARFAX. It has service records. And if you're, I mean, you know, CARFAX, as I've mentioned, is a tool. They only are able to tell you the data that they collect. So it's not CARFAX that's being deceptive about this. It's just the information that you see is the data that they were able to collect on this car.
Well, here's the car. You know this car personally, if I'm understanding.
Yes, I do know this car personally.
It doesn't look too bad there.
No, it doesn't look too bad here, but that body shop I told you about that Brent was painting a Diablo, that's that exact same body shop. They did $152,000 worth of repair work to this car, and it still shows up as a clear one-owner CARFAX with records. And so, but again, there's a big difference between a Murcielago that is an original paint car, again, that was treated well, and then there's one that's run off the road and had $150,000 worth of damage, and the entire car had to be repainted.
Sure. You know, CARFAX, again, it's information. It's neither good or bad, but you can use it sometimes.
Let's touch on one thing real quick.
Okay.
You mentioned these are high-end examples. I know that you see the attendance in the list. We have the permission of somebody that's on the call right now to use it for, his wife has an Audi Q5, and we ran the CARFAX on his wife's Q5 yesterday, and it came up as a clear one-owner CARFAX. And he's told me
a good driver.
His wife is a good driver, absolutely,
Yeah.
She is. However, somebody else ran into her, and so that car, his car, has been repainted, and he was astonished to see that it did not show up on CARFAX. So I think it's important to mention that you know, CARFAX doesn't just miss Lamborghinis and Ferraris. There's also everyday Audis that, you know, most of us drive. Those get missed on CARFAX as well.
Let's talk about, you know, ways in which people listening to the call can use CARFAX to their advantage when negotiating a sale or purchase of a car.
Absolutely. You know, one of the reasons why CARFAX is not able to collect all the data is because there is a loss of value associated with what we'd call a ding on CARFAX. And so if an accident does show up on CARFAX, that vehicle typically will be it's priced lower than most everything else that's on the market. The reason is the loss of value. Nobody wants a car that was in an accident. So one of the ways that we use CARFAX to our advantage is if I know somebody wants me to source a Corvette or a Porsche and they're going to race the car, or if they really don't care if it was in an accident, what I'll do is I'll find a car that has a ding on the CARFAX, and if we go and inspect the car and I find out that it has all original body panels and all original paint, and the accident that shows up on CARFAX really was just a bumper, that's a great way that my client can save $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 off the price of that vehicle and use CARFAX, a ding on CARFAX to their advantage.
Okay, that's neat. That's good information. Now, something you said early on in our first meetings that we had, there's a big difference between information and expertise. I know that holds true in my industry, and it definitely holds true in your industry.
Yeah, you know, in the world that we live in, there's an endless supply of data that's available online at all times. And CARFAX is one of those data points. And so I think it's important just to know the difference between information and expertise, especially in the high-end automotive industry.
Right, right. Okay, that's there's another car service out there called TrueCar. They're doing lots of advertising on TV. In fact, I'll show an ad right here, and I think many people have seen this.
You're here to buy a car. Infinite options, endless fine print, and so many opportunities to make a wrong move. What would help is simply being able to recognize a fair price. Doesn't seem that complicated, right? To see what others are paying just to know you're getting a fair deal. That's never really been possible. But along comes a radically new way to buy a car called TrueCar. And now it is. TrueCar has pricing data on every make and model, so all you have to do is search for the car you want. There it is. Now you're an expert in less than a minute. You see the average price other buyers are paying in your area and the TrueCar price estimate, which tells you what you can expect to pay for the car you want. Then you go to your TrueCar certified dealer to get guaranteed savings. You don't have to negotiate a thing. Unless, of course, you want to. TrueCar was founded on the idea that when the facts are out in the open, we all benefit. This is how car buying was always meant to be. This is TrueCar.
TrueCar, that's one where the Generation Xer and me, and it's a free service. They put a lot of money into the website, tons of money into the advertising. I'm thinking, okay, what's the catch? And that's the Generation X. I look at that ad, that's what I think. So talk about TrueCar.
Yeah, this is another difference between information and expertise, I would say. TrueCar is again, it's a tool that I can't ask the question if anybody's heard of this, but I'm going to guess most folks on the line have heard of TrueCar. If you haven't, it's just it's a car buying tool that you can use to purchase a new car. It helps you get an understanding of what the MSRP is, what the window sticker, and then what the actual cost is of the vehicle. And the cost, the way that they define it, is the invoice price. So how close to invoice can you get to pay for that new car?
Well, let's give an example. I have a client, again, we have permission to use. That is not the client. That's my son Calvin, who loves the client, and the Audi R8, and that's down in Marco Island, Florida. And this is an example of, this is the second transaction this client did with you, where he hired you for your services. Why don't we talk about this example right here?
Yeah, what was interesting about this is we were actually looking at purchasing a pre-owned Audi R8, because if you can buy the correct one-owner pre-owned car, then again, it can make sense. And so we went through a discovery meeting, and we were at the time looking at pre-owned vehicles, cars that had anywhere between 9,000 all the way down to, one of the cars we were looking at had 1,800 miles on it. And so, you know, obviously my client wanted to let somebody else pay the initial depreciation, so we almost purchased a car out in Seattle and made a road trip to his home in Marco Island. He was looking forward to that. But I said, before we pull the trigger on that car, let's see exactly what we can buy a new car for. And so, just as I told you guys all that I've used CARFAX, I also use TrueCar. But it's important to understand how these tools make money. As Rob, you mentioned, it's a free service, and so I think we'll get to that in a second. But so this is the car that we ended up buying. We bought a 2014. Audi R8. I should say that I sourced this car. I didn't buy it. My client bought it directly from the Audi dealership. And so the sticker price on that car, it's a little small for some of you guys to see, but it was $187,300. Now, one of the areas where I think that TrueCar does a great job is telling you what the invoice price is. And so the invoice price on this, I believe, was $175. Are we going?
Whoops, wrong way. Yep.
Going there next. So the invoice price, TrueCar, you'll see in the next screen, tells us that the invoice price on this car was $175. And this is the actual invoice from this dealership for the very car that we ended up sourcing.
I was putting up a TrueCar right now for this specific car right here, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. If you can do that. It's right here. So this isn't. This is a 2015, so the prices are slightly off, but works for our presentation purposes. So the invoice price on this car is $185,595. You see that up on top. Now, as I mentioned, TrueCar is accurate in that they tell you what the factory invoice is. Where I disagree with TrueCar is that we did much better than buying it for $3,000 over invoice, which is precisely what TrueCar told us. You know, they said invoice is $175. I'm looking at the invoice in the dealership, and they said we could buy it for $176. If you want to go to the bill of sale.
Well, before we get there, it's kind of interesting based on dealership locations, and some dealers would negotiate, others would not, and so it's kind of the dynamics. It was in the fall of 2014, last year.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I don't know where everybody on this call is from, but my client was down in Marco Island, and so I was talking with Naples Audi, and they had a car. Obviously, I knew what invoice was on their car, and I said, how close can we get to invoice? And they were $10,000 over invoice for this car. They were only going to discount the car a couple $1,000s. Now, again, information versus expertise. You go back to, we're going into winter in Chicago. I know that Chicago is a larger market than Naples, and that Naples doesn't really want to move a whole lot. We bought this car for $162,000.
Plus your fee, which was your flat fee of $3,500.
Plus my fee for this, absolutely.
Still a big savings.
He's still got a great savings, and he wondered, well, Dave, how did you do this? And so we just had a discussion. There's the front end on the deal, and the front end for a dealership is $175 versus $187, whatever the numbers were. That's the front end. But when us as the consumer look at this, the invoice price. What does the invoice actually mean? Is the invoice, a lot of folks think that the invoice is what the dealership is paying for the car. That's not the case. The invoice price is, again, it's in between the front end and the back end. So the dealership initially buys the car for $175, but the back end, depending on a number of different variables, can be another 6%. And so that's why people probably are looking at this saying, how did they buy it for $162? What dealership would sell a brand new Audi and lose $13,000? And the answer is they didn't lose $13,000. That's the back end, the dealership incentive cash.
And all cars work this way. Whether or not, obviously, again, we're talking about a high-end exotic car, but even Subarus, Jeeps, all of them.
All manufacturers have a front end and a back end, and they all differ depending on manufacturer, and a lot of dealerships will differ as well. So there's a number of different variables. You can have a high-performing large dealership with high CSI ratings. They'll get
stop that. CSI is
Customer Satisfaction Index, and it's a rating that manufacturers use to grade their dealers as to how well run of a dealership they are and how happy their customer is with the experience they had at that dealership.
All right, let's speak of dealerships. Let's go over and talk about the dealerships, if you will. Many people buy cars at dealerships. I think probably the majority of people on the call do buy cars at dealerships. But on the service end, we start talking about dealerships. We call it the good, bad, and ugly. And being an optimist, let's start with the good. When is a good time to go to the dealer to have service work done?
Well, dealers, depending on which manufacturer we're talking about, but most dealers are going to be clean, comfortable environments. Many higher-end dealerships will have, you'll have a coffee machine, and you may even have a personal masseuse there. Last time I was at a Lexus dealership, there was a full-time masseuse on staff. So dealerships can be good for that cushy experience. They're also a great place to bring your car for warranty work. Now, some of the hesitations that folks have with bringing their car to the dealership is they say, well, I'm overpaying.
For the same part, same tire, same windshield wiper?
Correct. But dealerships have gotten a lot more competitive lately. They have marked down, there's a loss leader. And so they've marked down certain parts to get people in the door. And so I had a client that was trying to source tires for his wife's car, called around to a number of different tire shops, got the lowest price. Treating tires as a commodity. And then he thought, I'm going to call the dealership and see. I wonder where my dealership comes in. His dealership was actually the lowest price.
Wow.
And it was because They're tired of losing business to the third-party shops. So I like
So be an
dealerships.
educated consumer, know what things cost, compare with the dealer, and it can be a good source. Now let's talk about kind of the bad of the dealer's maintenance programs.
Yeah, the bad is, why was this dealership the lowest price on tires? Because they wanted to get you in the door, and once your car's up in the air, they're going to tell you about the other things that are wrong with your vehicle, or when's the last time you replaced your air filter, or have you had a fuel system flush, or we need to do a transmission service on your car. So they use these lost leaders in order to get you in the door, and then they upsell you. And
Sure.
Unfortunately, a lot of my clients don't know. I don't know if my car needs a fuel system flush. I don't know what kind of oil. I don't know what the regular maintenance is on my Mercedes S-Class. And so I trust the dealer because, why would they lie to me?
Is there an alternative for maintenance than a dealership?
Absolutely. There are independent shops depending on the car you own and what you're having done to it, how old is it, which make, which model. There's important things to know. If you have an old Porsche and you bring your car, typically speaking to the Porsche dealership, there's a good chance that there's somebody that is much more familiar with that older Porsche model than the guys at the dealership.
Sure.
The dealership is factory trained technicians they have to know how to work on the latest and greatest cars and warranty work and all the computers and technology. But if you have an old timer that got tired of working for, the dealership, he went and opened up his own shop. That could be who you want to take your old 911 to.
Question just came in here. I'm going to take it right now. Do you as Precision Automotive Group, do you have kind of a directory of these not body shops, but independent service people that they could take a car like a Mercedes or an Audi to?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and I do have shops that I use all around the United States. Again, depending on the make and the model of your car, what year is it, and geographically where are you located, and what are we having done to it. But for folks, again, I default back to the higher end. But for folks that own a Ferrari and need a belt service done, you can save thousands of dollars having a belt service done at an independent shop. And if you're not going to show your Ferrari and try to win an award, why not save that money? It's the same belt. They're still buying that belt from the Ferrari dealership. So likewise, for Audi and for BMW, Mercedes, why not save yourself a little bit of money? And I don't know many independent shops that have the overhead that dealerships have. So,
okay. Well, let's talk about the ugly. This kind of surprised me. I thought something that popped in my head was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they drop the car off and the guys take it out for a joyride. But you did talk about the ugly there.
Yeah, the ugly is difficult to talk about. That picture that you're looking at right there, we'll touch on that.
I can't blow it up, but it's back in the back corner with the...
So what we have here is a shop. You've got a 911, you've got an Aston Martin, an old Mercedes, you've got an E-Type, but then in the far back corner, that's a Lamborghini Diablo. I know the gentleman that currently owns this car, and he bought it many years ago and took it home, was washing it, noticed the roof leak. He went back to the dealership, said, hey, the roof's leaking on my, and they said, listen, it's a Lamborghini. All roofs leak. So he wasn't satisfied, and he talked with another Diablo owner, and that guy said, well, my roof doesn't leak. And he said, well, what's going on here? And so we dug in a bit deeper, and we found out that very car, Dennis Rodman put that car into a light pole sideways. And it came up on CARFAX as a clean, I think it was a two-owner car, but still, clean CARFAX. He was astonished. What do you do? What are you talking about? How could this be? And it's unfortunate. And we won't name names, but I think you have a link here, Rob. There's bad things that happen at dealerships, and there are good dealerships and there are bad dealerships. Unfortunately, those are two pictures. I've seen cars fall off of a lift. It does happen. There's other areas where you'll see, I think further down, all right, that Ferrari F40 that you see right there. That car today is black. That car was wrecked, and the folks at Gas Monkey Garage created a whole series on this car. They redid it. They sold it. I think they recently sold it for a second time at Barrett-Jackson, but that car today is black. And that was a dealership mechanic that crashed that car.
It's a mechanic at the dealership.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that there's, I mean, this is just a Google image search, and you folks at home can search for this as well. X out of here and go down just a little bit more. I think there's a newer example. If you just scroll down a little bit, Rob, I think that it's, there should be a Ferrari on the side of the highway with a mechanic sitting next to it. I don't know where. Well, anyways, there's a recent example of a Ferrari Enzo, and that car is currently involved in a lawsuit out in New Jersey. The mechanic crashed the car, and so the ugly is knowing who owns your dealership, exactly who is driving it. Is it just the owner and the mechanic, or is there a porter involved? Is there somebody going for a joyride? Are they using your car to possibly try to sell a like vehicle to another customer? What exactly happens with your car at the dealership? And unfortunately, as you all can do the Google image search, there are bad things that happen out there, and so my job is to try to help reduce the risk of you.
Right. Well, let's talk about your job and what you do, Precision Automotive Group, and that you navigate automotive repair. It's not uncommon for you to talk to the mechanics, the chief mechanic, or any mechanic for that matter, in which your client retains you, and you advise on what should be done to that car and work with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my job is it can go as in-depth as somebody coming to me and saying, we're going to do a restoration on my old 356 and I want to win an award, and so we pick a body shop, a restoration shop. We go deep into that and I take care of everything, and it can be as simple as, my clients have cars, their wife drops it off at the dealership for service, gets into a loaner, leaves, and the service advisor will actually call me. Not my client, not my client's wife, because they don't really want to be bothered with, picking, do we put Michelin's or Pirelli's on the car? Are we going to do a synthetic oil change or regular oil? Do you want to clean your air filter? The service advisor calls me, and I decide what's done with their vehicle, and I only do that, obviously, with what's in the best interest of my client and what they want done to their vehicle.
Sure, but I've learned from knowing you over the last year and with your business model, there's a tremendous cost associated with not properly maintaining an automotive portfolio or your automotives or your cars, for that matter. There's a hidden cost to that. Yeah,
there is. There's just because that you can afford the monthly payment doesn't mean that you can afford to own the vehicle. So there is a tremendous cost with buying an underserviced vehicle, and just because you're saving $2,000 on the purchase price of, name that, pre-owned car, doesn't mean that you're not going to have to pay $4,000 a couple months when you visit the mechanic to get that vehicle caught up on maintenance. So you want to take into consideration the value of an underserviced car.
Sure. We're getting near the end of the presentation. For those of you who have questions, please feel free to chat, type them in, and we will take them. We're getting some coming in, but we're just going to be going to question and answer shortly here. But Dave, let's talk about your company, Precision Automotive Group, and how one goes about retaining your services. And from my understanding, there's 3 levels, if you will, and maybe we can just touch on the 3 levels. So the first one is?
First one is what I call car coaching. It's or auto coaching. It's just an hourly example. My clients can call and say, what do you think? I had on the left, you have a Porsche. We had a client that called and said, hey, my neighbor just traded in his 98 911. He got big money for it. Why is my 99, a year newer, worth so much less? And so it's that question that I get about twice a day. Dave, what do you think about this? It can also be for folks that, that picture on the right is a client of mine who's currently selling his 05 Ford GT. He bought that car new. He's taken care of it for the past 10 years. He is the one that has only put 671 miles on it, and so now he wants to be the one that's involved with the sale of that vehicle. If you go to a broker is going to say, well, you let me sell the car. I understand that my clients, sometimes they have a vested interest. Cars are an emotional purchase. It's an emotional ownership experience, and if you want to be the one to sell your car, I can come alongside you and coach you on how do we present your car. what price do we ask? How do you answer those questions that are coming in? Do we choose to sell it to a broker who offers us more money than a private party, or are you okay with your neighbor owning that car and being the next caretaker of that vehicle? So the first level is auto coaching. It's straight hourly advice, and I welcome it.
And you charge, they buy what, blocked hours with you, and they kind of, you say, okay, I'm going to buy 5 hours of your time, and you sort of go against that?
It's start the clock, stop the clock. So whenever you're calling me, whenever I'm working for you, I don't round up, and it's to the minute, whatever, however much time you want to engage my services for.
Okay, very clean, transparent transaction.
100%.
Okay. Let's talk about the second level of service that you offer.
Yeah, second level would be project-based. And so that Mercedes that you see there is a 2012 S-Class with a sport package. And so a lot of my clients are folks that typically were the ones, as they said, Dave, I used to be the one that goes into the dealership, and I would buy the car, the new Mercedes, every 3 to 4 years, and I'd plop down $100,000, and they'd give me half that for the car I'm trading in. And I always thought somebody's getting an incredible deal. I'm getting half of what I paid for my car, but I never knew if that was a good used vehicle, Dave, and I could afford to buy new, so I did. This is where I come in for that 2012 that you see there pictured. This is the first pre-owned car that my client had bought in a long time, but that car had a sticker of $112,000. I was a one owner, not just a clean CARFAX, but I actually know that was an original paint car, never so much had a bumper painted on it. And we bought that car for half of the $112,000 sticker. And so we'll do project-based where you don't want to be as personally involved. You want me to go out and source the vehicle for you, ensure that it's a good vehicle, inspect it, negotiate on your behalf. All you have to do is wire the money to the dealership, and I even take care of the delivery. It shows up in your driveway.
Great. And then in the third way, which might be more for someone who has a portfolio of automotives and that they want to maintain, just like they have a portfolio of stocks or
these are for folks that want to engage my services on an ongoing basis. It can be folks that own a number of different vehicles, and we have monthly discussions about is it preservation versus restoration? Where should I be taking my car for detailing, for a car wash? Who should be maintaining my car? What kind of insurance? You wouldn't believe the number of folks that are current clients, and when we have a discussion about their insurance, to save a couple $100 a month, they're insuring their high value collectible cars with a company like Progressive. If something happens to the car, you can't be using, you got to have good insurance on your vehicle, because how it gets put back together again directly affects the value. So it can be folks that own a number of cars that have an ongoing discussion. It could be folks that own wealth advisory firms that want to retain my services on behalf of their clients. It can be partners at a law firm as a perk.
Okay, here a question just came in on insurance. For someone who has a luxury automobile, can you describe where would they go for insurance? Maybe not to their local insurance agent. They might go where to
Sure. Again, it depends on the type of vehicle that we're insuring, but for my client that I recently had this discussion with, he had some old air-cooled Porsche 911s. Progressive's not a bad company. If you have an everyday BMW and you don't mind where that vehicle is painted, where you have collision work done, you can save a couple dollars. Maybe you had a couple accidents, and that's why we're going to Progressive for a couple months. So it can be something. I'm not opposed to Progressive, but if you own a fleet of vehicles and you're planning on owning this for a while, there are better insurance companies. So as I say to all my clients, I have folks that use Progressive and I have folks that use Chubb. And so what we do is we'll assess your automotive footprint and we'll decide where along that spectrum makes the most sense for you as a vehicle owner.
Another one, Dave. How do you work with clients who are not either in the Chicago market or, for that matter, the Naples, Florida, because you do get down to Naples quite a bit, but do you work with clients on a national basis, I guess this question is?
Yeah, absolutely. And so...
and how do you work with them, maybe?
Sure. Well, we'll do something very similar to you, Rob. And we utilize GoToMeeting. 100% of what we're doing is transparent, and so You'll log in, you'll look at my computer screen, I'll show you the various vehicle options. Like I mentioned for my client down in Marco Island, he could have gone 17 miles over to Audi of Naples. He could have spent more money and bought that R8, but we were also considering cars outside of his geographic location. So we almost went to Seattle and made a road trip of it, but we also bought that car in Chicago. Sure. We utilized the fact that it was the end of the month, heading into winter. It's an Audi R8. You're not going to drive that in the winter in Chicago. And so we utilized all those things to work to my client's advantage. So your geographic location, it's really irrelevant to us. And there's ways also for folks that want to buy a car, and they say, okay, well, that's fine. I know I want to buy a car, but Dave, I want to test drive this car before. And you're in Chicago, and I'm down in Dallas. How do I do this? I know dealers in Dallas, and you probably have neighbors that have a similar car. So there's ways that you can test drive a new Mercedes S-Class, a BMW 7 Series, and an Audi R8 or A8. Make a decision between those three models, and then I'll source the car for you elsewhere. So because of technology, geographic constraints really don't get in the way.
Okay, here comes a question. I knew we were going to get this one. Tesla. What do you think of Tesla? And have you ever negotiated with Tesla?
First of all, let me say that I like Teslas. I love that they've come in and they have introduced disruptive technology to an automotive marketplace that has long operated the way that the good old boys do. Look at how Uber has just turned the cab industry upside down. So from that standpoint, I like Tesla, because they've come in and they've said, we're not going to operate the way that you guys have always done it. Status quo is not okay. I like their vehicles. From a technology standpoint, there's numerous benefits to Tesla out there. And for anybody interested in Tesla, they'd probably research that. However, there are areas where I need to caution folks on. A lot of what Tesla does better than anybody else, in addition to, yes, they make a better battery pack, and it's a great looking car, and it's a new way of doing business. Rob, really, there are some gaps in the technology, and I give them a lot of credit for the second car they've ever built. It's a great vehicle, but there's still some gaps. There's some areas where you as a consumer need to be cautious, because there's a lot of marketing that goes into selling a $100,000 vehicle. And so I would argue they're not the safest vehicles out on the road. We don't know what a Tesla is worth a couple of years from now. Quite frankly, we don't know if Tesla is going to be around 10 years from now. Are they acquired by somebody? Do they go out of business? What happens when you need to replace your battery? And there's only one company out there that that provides a warranty on the battery. I'm going to get.
So it's not Tesla. I always thought Tesla was an iPad with wheels, but
it pretty much is. It pretty much is an iPad with wheels, but there's only one company out there that guarantees the performance of their battery, and believe it or not, it's the least expensive electric vehicle on the market. It's not the Tesla, it's the Nissan Leaf. So I'm not a proponent of buying the Nissan Leaf. No, the Leaf has got some faults with it as well. But so overall, I like Tesla. I really do. But there are some areas where I advise my clients to be cautious, depending on what they're planning on doing with this car.
My grandson is going to be getting his first car. This is the question, by the way. My grandson's going to be getting his first car, and we have approximately $15,000 to spend. What kind of car would you recommend? I assume it's being a pre-owned one, but...
Yeah, I would say we would have a discovery meeting similar to the discovery meeting that I have with all my clients. We wouldn't focus so much on, do you want a Ferrari or Lamborghini? We would say, what do we value? Do we value safety? Do we value technology? Do we value reliability? Do we value what color it is? How many miles are on it? How many years? Is your grandson going to be buying this car from you, or are you paying for this car? So I think that we can use that as a teachable moment. And so for $15,000, it would depend on a number of different variables and what you as a client values, but there's plenty of good cars we can get out there for 15 grand. Even some of the newer ones, you can buy new cars for $15,000. Not many, but yeah, in this category, for your grandson going away to college or in high school, or however old he is, it doesn't say, I would say a pre-owned car, but we would pick the right pre-owned car. I guess I can answer, what are some good $15,000 cars? I like Toyota, but not in this category. I would say for $15,000, I think that Toyota has actually been riding off of the reputation that they built for themselves back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know that that's the best option for them. I like Subaru in this category. What Subaru is doing, they've always had just a phenomenal all-wheel drive technology, but they're incredibly safe vehicles. They do not depreciate like the rest of cars out there. They really don't break down. They're very reliable, and it's a name that nobody's heard of. So I think Subaru could be a good option. Quite frankly, I like old Germans. So there are a number of old BMWs, Audis, and Mercedes that fall into this category, and we as Americans don't understand wagons. Europeans certainly understand wagons, but Americans do not. So a 5-year-old BMW wagon with 60,000 miles on it, that was owned by, maybe it was your grandmother that drove this car. That's a great vehicle that you can go away to college in. It's safe, it's reliable, and it moves. It's a great vehicle. So there's a number of options out there in even the $15,000 range, and I don't mind operating in that.
Well, here's another question. It sounds like an everyday question. I'm thinking about buying an SUV for my family. This person I know for a fact has two sons and looking for a family SUV. Should they go new or used? If new, why? If used, which vehicles hold their value the best?
Sure. Did they say how much they want to spend?
In the $20,000 to $30,000 range.
$20,000 to $30,000.
Let's say that. They didn't say that, but I'm putting that in there for them.
Okay.
I know this person.
$20,000 to $30,000 for an SUV can depend on how large of an SUV you want to go. First question I always ask my clients is, why do we want an SUV? And normally it's, I want space, I want to sit up higher, I want it to be safer. How often are you going to be going off-road? The answer is always never.
Right.
Do you need an SUV or is an all-wheel drive wagon? I go back to Subaru. A new Subaru Outback could work for them. If they wanted to go a little bit larger, again, I've mentioned I'm not a huge fan of Toyota, but for the Land Cruiser, Sequoia, and Highlander models, I think that those are great vehicles that Toyota is putting out. They have been for years. The outgoing Chevy Tahoe, the GMT 900 platform series truck. I'm sorry to use car lingo, but I'm not a huge fan of the new ones. I think that the outgoing Tahoe is a great vehicle. I have a lot of friends at Ford from my supplier side, day of the business, but I can't recommend a Ford in this category.
Sure.
So Toyotas, again, it just depends on a number of different variables. It's tough to answer this question specifically without having an actual discovery meeting with them, but those are some off the top of my head that come to mind.
Now, here's another question that just came in, and the first part of our presentation today, we talked about the high-end market because that's kind of where the fun is in talking about. People recognize some names like Justin Bieber. But your business model, you work with everybody, not just a high-end. So that the question about the $15,000 for that first car for this guy's son, how would you work with someone that how do they do on a project basis or an hourly basis? What do you tend to, I'm not going to put you on the spot, I ask you what your fee is for that specific case because you don't know what you're doing yet. But I guess what the question this is, the cost benefit, if you will, for the person who's listening to this call right now.
Sure.
For that $15,000 car.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, first of all, I would say, just as you've mentioned, I start with the discovery meeting. So I find out who you are, what you're looking for, what sort of vehicle, what are you going to be doing with it, where will it be serviced, how many miles a year are you going to drive it. And so we'll do a discovery meeting. That's on me. You don't ever pay for that. So we'll do a discovery meeting, and then we'll make a decision. Does it make sense for you to go hourly car coaching, or does it make sense for you to just give the ball to me entirely and I'll take care of it, and we'll do a project based? Depends on the level of involvement that the client wants.
So better say, right, what you said there, you'd be willing to talk to someone for a discovery meeting, 20, 30 minutes, either by GoToMeeting, their phone, kind of get what they're looking for, and kind of let them know the direction that they would work with you, how they would retain you, how they would compensate you, and let them make the decision from there.
Absolutely.
I can say for the number of clients who have used you, and I've seen the economics, I've seen the numbers since Wheaton Well Partners, no numbers. We've seen you always benefit that client either getting a better car for the money, and saving them off the purchase price or getting more for the sale of all different transactions.
Yeah, there's in the years that I've been doing this, there's really only a handful of cases where I haven't been able to recover my fee from my clients fivefold at the very least. But when we encounter, that's kind of a situation, maybe it makes more sense for me to turn this over to one of the brokers that I deal with. Let him make $1,000, $500, whatever the case may be,
sure,
and go to an auction and get them a car, something like that. But yes,
but to
as
start
you
with you,
mentioned,
and one thing I noticed about you, and I'm going to give you a little plug here, that I was meeting with a client Tuesday last week down in Florida, and she was so great. She met you at the workshop we did on the cars on Fifth back in February, and you told her she wanted to hire you to get, I want to say, a 2-year-old Jeep Grand Cherokee, and you looked at her and said, they retained their value so high, you're better off going direct to the dealer and buying it there. And she thought that was very, very, very highly of you to direct her in the right direction in a way that would not necessarily come back and benefit you. And so I guess the message here is you'll work with anybody and you'll give them honest feedback, and if you're going to be compensated, you're going to provide value back, and that's something we've seen. We have 3 minutes to go here, and I'm going to wrap it up here. And last question I have here, and I know the answer to this, but would Dave be willing to come and make presentations at private client or private groups, such as maybe neighborhood associations or Kiwanis or groups like that? Would you be willing to do that? Are you available to do that?
Yeah, depending on the circumstances, I absolutely would do that. I'm actually headed back down to Florida next week. One of my clients has asked me to come speak at his golf community, and so sure.
So you're available to make, and I can say Dave is very good in front of people, and it's actually an entertaining to see him in a live group and actually fielding questions. It's a lot of fun. So if you have a group out there that you'd like to have Dave come and make a presentation to, you can contact me and I'll forward it on to Dave. One of the things we are going to send out to everybody who has registered is this right here. And Dave, what is this that we're looking at?
So this is just a little fact sheet that I've made available for my clients. I think we originally made these available for Wheaton Wealth clients, but this is just links that can be...
Oh, great resource.
Yeah, these are just great resources. So go back to the first page, if you would. So CARFAX and AutoCheck, you guys know what those are. They're vehicle history report companies. But then there's also search engines. You want to know, some people just like shopping for cars. I talk to a lot of folks that's what they do on their break. They enjoy shopping for cars. Now, you also have leisure reading and other research websites. This is just a great resource that I make available for my clients. I've mentioned safety. I have Euro NCAP, IIHS, and NHTSA. Guys, I've spent hours actually watching crash test footage. I know what happens to vehicles when they're crashed, and it's fascinating to see the difference between the two of them. So when somebody comes to me and says, I want this car, and I'm not going to use a name, but then we say, what do you value? And they put safety at the top of the list. I show them what happens to that car when it gets crash tested. And usually they change their opinion. And they said, wow, I thought, this manufacturer always markets that they're the highest rated in terms of safety, and they're a 5-star, 6-star, whatever crash test rating.
Sure.
They're not, only for specific models. And so, and on the back of this, it just has how we're compensated. Guys, it's very straightforward. There's no hidden fees. And
we'll send this out to everybody post this webinar. So with that, Dave, I really appreciate you being here today. And this is going to be recorded. It's going to be on our website. And so those of you who are listening, if you would like to have other people listen to us, we can get you a link that you can send out to them as well. Just want to let everyone know we are going to do our next webinar is going to be Wednesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central. The topic on this one is the economic benefits of staying physically fit with the exercise phys director, Dr. Peter Walters, and he will be having a conversation with Wheaton Wealth Partners, Heather Coulter. I can tell you this will be a very entertaining and informative webinar that you're not going to want to miss, so please stay tuned for information coming out on this webinar. So with that, Dave, thank you for being here with us. We thank everyone for attending, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everyone.